guys and gals. Welcome to Hoth. And believe it or not, it's not snowing in North Dakota. I know that's what everybody thinks, but no, it's not snowing. It's actually kind of rainy out today after a beautiful 4th we had yesterday. We had fireworks right here at the Capitol. I got to go watch that, which was really cool. But today I'm talking with one of my best buddies ever. This is Pastor Chad Payne from down in beautiful Alabama. And you can look behind him and see that Chad Payne is not like any pastor that I've ever met in my entire life. He's one of us, children. I swear he's one of us, man. He's just a cool guy. And what we're going to be talking about is something that's right up Pastor Payne's alley. We're going to be talking a little bit about how there are good values that can be found within the Star Wars universe. We're going to be talking about some other nerddom things as well. But we always think about Star Wars as that good side versus the light side. Of course, we have the rebellion, doing the good fight. But we also have the dark side, which is the Sith thing. But I love in Star Wars is there's a redemption story, even with Darth Vader. So, Pastor, tell me what you think about when you think about Star Wars from an ethical perspective and a story of faith. Really, it can be found in Star Wars. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and first of all, thanks, Chris, for having me on, man. I love you so much and appreciate you so much. And it's so wonderful to have a fellow nerd to geek out about stuff like this with. And so thanks for spending the time with me today. Yeah, listen, I saw Star Wars Episode 4. Of course, it wasn't known as Episode 4 back then, but I saw the original Star Wars back in 1977 or 78. I was 6 years old, and Luke Skywalker was my first hero. Leia was my first crush, and so I grew up just loving that world and loving that just how that defined reality. And at that age, it's a cool movie with lots of fun visuals and that kind of thing. But as I got older, and even as I went into ministry and began to just look at some of these themes that's in it, it really is the classic story of good versus evil, isn't it? I mean, it's almost an archetype. The characters are, and one thing that stood out to me a few years ago, I was reading a book by John Eldredge called Epic. And he talked about how, in fact, he used Star Wars as an example, used Lord of the Rings as an example, and a few others, that all great stories are a retelling of the story, comparing it to the gospel, how that the great stories all begin with a state of innocence, and then the introduction of evil and innocence lost, and then there's a redemption arc to where innocence or paradise, or however you want to phrase it, is restored. And so we see that in the original epic, episodes 1 through 6. When you look at it with episodes 4, 5, and 6, Luke is the central figure, and it's his ascension to becoming a Jedi and that kind of thing. But when you added the prequels, you realize that the whole 6-story arc, it is, as you said, actually a story of redemption. It's the story. Anakin is the central figure, and it's his introduction to evil, how evil pulled at him, corrupted him, and brought him down. But then there is this process through the love of his son that pulled him back to the light, and you see his redemption there at the end to where he's restored. And so, as I've grown, it's like my understanding of this story has grown with it, and it's just made me fall in love with it that much more. And of course, the special effects are still cool.
Absolutely. And I love that, like in 4, 5, and 6, you just kind of get that standard good versus evil. All right. So we have the kind of like the Western, you got the guys in the black hats and the guys in the white hats. It's right. Very dry and everything. But for me, like you're talking about in episodes 1, 2, and 3, it broadened that story out. So you can see a lot of people were like, well, Anakin seems kind of wussified a little bit, and you see how he's brooding and everything. But I think that's within all of us, as we see that there's something that tugs us and brings us out away from what we truly are, that we don't see that Anakin was always evil. He started out as a good guy, and he was torn apart, but he wasn't torn apart because he necessarily, to me, that he wanted to be evil. I think sometimes in our own lives and everything, as we can get drawn to the dark side, thinking that we're doing something good. So elaborate a little on that with Anakin. It's how he wanted to, because he was basically the emperor had lied to him.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a very good observation, that what we get in the prequels is not, well, we do see Anakin's thirst for power to a point, and that perhaps made him more vulnerable, but ultimately it's trying so hard to get what he loves and what he believes in, to save, of course, to save Padme, but to look at it in a broader theme, to protect that which he loves. And Palpatine was able to twist that and to corrupt it. And I think that it's a great picture of how we can be well-intentioned, and yet if we try to go about doing what we think is best, but do it in the wrong way, it can still lead us down a dark path. I mean, think about addiction, for example. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to become a heroin addict. I think that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. No, they're trying to, in many cases anyway, they're trying to escape some pain. They're trying to deal with overwhelming problems, and it seems like an escape for just a moment, and yet that pull just continues to draw them into that to where it becomes an addiction, to where they can't get free. And in some ways it's similar in that Anakin is trying to protect that which he loves. He's trying to avoid the pain of losing someone he loves, like he did with his mother. And in doing that, he's so desperate that in that moment, when Mace Windu has Palpatine backed into a corner, Anakin's final exclamation is, "I need him. I'll do anything to protect Padme." And I think that says a lot about the allure of evil. I mean, there's ramifications for that in not only in our personal lives, but in the political world. Trying to do good but doing it the wrong way. I mean, that's applicable. It's a universal struggle, how to do good without taking ethical shortcuts that can corrupt us. And I think that's what the story does so well. And I think that I'll even add that I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi, the series, added another layer to that was just beautiful. I mean, Hayden Christensen knocked it out of the park in that series, didn't he?
Did. Fantastic job with that.
Yeah. And that last conversation he has with Obi-Wan, with his mask half destroyed, and the voice alternating between his and James Earl Jones's, and the light alternating between the blue and the red. And you see just how tortured he is. Now, I wondered about that when he tells Obi-Wan, "I am not your failure. You didn't kill Anakin, I did." Is that a gesture of goodwill to let his master off the hook, to relieve him of the agony that he's been experiencing? Or I don't know. I'm not sure what the motivation of that is, but you see just glimpses of Anakin still coming out there, that even though evil has consumed him, there's still something there. And he's beginning to see just how much, as you said, the emperor has lied to him, has twisted him, is manipulating him even now, and yet he still can't break free from it.
I think that maybe there's that moment of clarity in that, is where just for that second is, number one, he's just been humbled a little bit, that he's not as powerful as he thinks he is.
Yeah,
and that old man absolutely bested him in that battle and let him go. And so he's seeing that, maybe there's that moment of clarity. But going with that point, I find that Anakin, one of his major flaws within his character is he's a very prideful young man.
Yeah.
I think that all starts right there at the beginning, is where he wins that pod race, and it just kind of just goes crazy from there. And the Bible tells us, that in Proverbs, that pride goeth before a fall. So kind of go a little bit further into that about the pridefulness. that Anakin does, and it's not just, him thinking he's going to be the best Jedi ever and everything, but even his relationship with Padme, he knew that it was forbidden to begin with, and everything that he did was all about him. So
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of go into that a little bit.
yeah. In fact, and this may seem a bit extreme, but um, I'm working on my doctorate right now, and I'm in the final project, and I'm doing a doctoral project on helping people that have suffered abuse, specifically sexual abuse. And so it's interesting. I've actually thought a little bit about this, that, because I've been studying predatory behavior and grooming and that kind of thing. And when you watch in Attack of the Clones how Anakin pursues Padme, even to the point of when she says to him, don't look at me that way, it makes me uncomfortable, and that look he gives her, he's kind of a predator in this. He's kind of a stalker.
Oh, wow.
It really makes me uncomfortable when I watch it now, when I think about that. But yeah, I mean, it was all about what he wanted. He was obsessed with her, and apparently had thought about her for 10 years before they met again in Attack of the Clones. And knowing that it would be destructive to both of them, he still pursued that, to the point that, I mean, obviously Padme loved him, but there came a point to where she kind of collapsed internally and gave in to it, and so you see in that a lot of hubris and a lot of emotional immaturity in Anakin. So I think that is evidence of the character flaws that were there early on. One thing I'm curious about with that is, obviously we see Palpatine at the end of Phantom Menace taking an interest in Anakin, and it's mentioned a few times in episodes 2 and 3 how Palpatine has mentored Anakin over the years, become a father figure to him in some ways. And in Phantom Menace, when his mother talks about him, of course this is a mother talking about her son, but she says there's no greed in his heart, there's nothing but kindness in his heart. And yet by the time we see him in Attack of the Clones, he's selfish and arrogant and headstrong, and I wonder how much of that is Palpatine twisting him even at an early age.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Is wondering, you know, that influence, an
Mm-hmm.
influence at a young age, and he's slowly grooming him and bringing him up and everything is. It's quite disturbing now as you think about it. You see that when you were talking a little bit about grooming and stuff with these victims and everything. I think there is some victimization even with his character that
Yeah,
he has
yeah,
been taken advantage of.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Palpatine was very intentional, very careful about planting ideas and seeds of distrust with the Jedi Order. And then, of course, on the flip side of that, you have the hubris of the Jedi Order. That in one sense, I mean, that scene in the Senate, or not in the, excuse me, not in the Senate, but in the theater, when Palpatine is talking with Anakin and tells him the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. When he talks about how when something gains power, the only thing they fear is losing that power, and he implies that the Jedi are just like that they fear losing their power. The truth is, on certain levels, he was right. And the Jedi Order had, and I think partially in because it was pressed into fighting a war when it was meant to be a peacekeeper agency, and not not to lead in battle, but more and more they began to define their identity through their ability to hold on to power. And so we don't know how much of that, obviously, I mean, maybe some of the books have addressed this, I don't know, but we don't know how much of that is Palpatine's manipulations as well. But he was pulling the strings in a lot of different directions, because Anakin had this thirst for power. We also had the Jedi Order trying to preserve power, and seeds of distrust have been planted between Anakin and the Jedi Order. the Jedi Order and Palpatine. And so Palpatine triangulates all of that just so that he keeps everybody off balance. And when somebody's off balance, you can control them.
Absolutely. I love that you kind of brought kind of a dark side to the Jedi a little
Yeah.
bit. What is really interesting about the power things, I've always kind of wondered about that myself, is because you got the Jedi Council and everything, and they're very political. They're very involved in everything, and it seems like there's definitely a power struggle that's there. And so I can definitely see your point is where maybe they are trying to hold on to power, and maybe there was some truth to Palpatine. I don't think that he was exactly truthful in all of that. Of course, he's the Sith Lord, and so he has his own
Right.
agenda in that. But talking about
But
power,
and the best lies have a seed of truth. That's the thing, is that there, if there is a seed of truth there about that desire to hold on to power, then Palpatine could take that and blow it up and twist it and take those seeds of doubt that have already been planted in Anakin's mind. And this is one reason why Qui-Gon was never on the council, was because he saw through some of that, and he was in touch with the living force, which was like a different realm with the force. And so there was definitely some hubris that was pulling the Jedi into a place of like almost an echo chamber, that they justified the decisions they were making, like when they talked about how they would have to take over the Senate for a short time in episode 3 and that kind of thing. And even Yoda says, the dark place this will take us, and all of that. So they were aware of that, but because they were in their own echo chamber, they were justifying it. And so, again, we see the same thing happening in the political realm today and many other arenas.
absolutely. And I know that they have ordered more episodes for Kenobi, and of course, that last episode we did get to see Qui-Gon very shortly, and I am hoping so much, man, that he is going to be a big part of that next season. That would make me very happy indeed.
Oh, me too. He is by far my favorite Jedi.
I really liked it. That's with episode 1, like two of my favorite characters were killed in that first movie. It was like, oh no.
Yeah. Right.
Why didn't you kill the one we didn't like?
Right, exactly.
But talking about power and those seeds of truth that may not always be truthful, let's take it to Lord of the Rings. All right. This has really got me interested, as this past weekend I got to meet all 4 of the actors who played the hobbits in the series. And,
really? Wow. Yeah, cool.
Super cool, man. And believe it or not, it was like meeting real hobbits. They're all real little and all real humble. So it was real fun. Right?
That's great.
And they kept taking frequent breaks. So I imagine it was for 11s and, afternoon teas and all the things they needed to take.
Right.
They were super, super fun guys. But let's think about that one ring to rule them all. It all starts with that thirst for power.
Mm-hmm.
And that universal thing is, that thirst for power. And not only for the nerdum stuff that we're talking about, we can think about that in a lot within our own recent history, from Adolf Hitler and his thirst for power, all the destructive things that he did. And I think that these movies are a great way, the books, man, all the comic books and everything, is a great way for bringing ethical and moral lessons for everybody that's easy to understand. Somebody
Absolutely.
may not be able to understand the Bible. You're about to become a doctorate in Bible stuff, and can you at least admit that sometimes that stuff is pretty hard to understand and to kind of get in your brain sometimes?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, there are things that scholars have been debating on for centuries, and things that you can't resolve in a Facebook rant. And so, the world and spirituality and theology, all of it is so much more complicated than what we want to pretend that it is. And, ethical dilemmas are many times so much more complicated than what we want to pretend. One of the things that I love about Lord of the Rings, about Star Wars, about Star Trek, is that, going back to the idea of the archetypes, these stories, and I think we can probably see this most clearly with Lord of the Rings, these stories are modern day mythologies. The ancient Greeks, they had their mythologies about Zeus and elements of the world, and those kinds of things. And I don't know how much that they in later times believe that those things were literal, but at the very least they saw them as having universal truths. And so it was a way to interpret the world. And one of the things that we have lacked, especially in Western civilization, because we are analytical and scientific, and we want the literal truth. We want to split the atoms and figure out how everything works together. And I think and those are all wonderful things. And I'm a science buff too. I love studying astronomy and all of that. But at the same time, those facts don't always lead us to truth. And truth is something that can't be narrowed down to facts all the time. And so mythologies have a way of presenting these universal truths in a way that we can comprehend. I mean, again, forgive me, I'm a pastor, so I talk Bible stories. Think about the way Jesus ministered. He didn't have 3 points in a poem like we typically do today. When he was preaching, almost all the time, he was preaching through stories, and he wouldn't give clear answers. He asked way more questions than he answered. And so part of that was those stories were to evoke a feeling, which would evoke more questions, which would evoke a lot of introspection. And I just finished a 3-week series on the prodigal son, a parable in Luke 15, that took him probably 5 minutes to tell. And I've spent an hour and a half trying to unpack it and just barely scratch the surface. And so I think that that's one of the things about, say, Lord of the Rings, is that it gives us this imagery to look at, to personify evil. In Sauron, in the ring, this is something tangible that represents evil, and the quest for this ring represents this desire in all of us to have power. And so the things that stories like this present to us are universal. We can all find ourselves in these stories. I identify with Frodo so much, especially when Galadriel says that even the smallest person can change the course of the future. There's something in me that rises up and says, yes, I can make a difference, because it touches on something that's primal in all of us, something I believe that's God-given.
Absolutely. And I love the Lord of the Rings. At first, I was not a fan. I just couldn't get into it. The books were so hard to read. But you start to see that there's so much more. Of course, you got that classic mythology of good versus evil. But with that is that friendship, that there's true friendship that can be found. And that through having good friends in your life and good people in your life, you can overcome anything. And I think that's true in Star Wars as well. As Luke, Leia, Han Solo, all completely different. Of course, Chewbacca is completely different. And then they're friends with these droids of all things. Mm-hmm. And they come together because everybody there is completely different in their character, you know, but they all come together for a common purpose. And I think through all of these stories, it shows all of us is that we keep our friends close together. We see that we're all different, but we can all see each other for who we are, that we all have goodness inside of us, and we can accomplish great things. And I love that, man. It makes it so much easier to understand some of these really hard things to understand sometimes. And I love it.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about you, man, but this has been an amazing conversation today. is talking about, man, not only that good can overcome evil, and I think it's something that we need to get inside of us more than ever. Every time you turn the news on now, it's scarier than anything I see in a science fiction
Absolutely.
movie, and to see that good will still overcome evil, no matter
Yes.
what, And this has just been, man, real heartwarming today, and I thank you so much for your time. And man, give a shout out, man. You've got your own little internet stuff going on too, so people can actually watch you on Sunday mornings, man, and check out Pastor soon to be Dr. Payne. Tell me that's not going to be a comic book character right there.
Yeah.
Soon
I've
to
always
be
said that if the preaching gig doesn't work out with a name like Dr. Payne, I could have a career in professional wrestling.
something. Yeah, you can come up with it. But tell them folks out there how they can watch you and enjoy this fantastic stuff that you just brought to us today. So how can they
Well,
find
thank you
you?
so thank you so much. Yes, the church I pastor is New Life Assembly of God in Woodstock, Alabama, and we live stream our services on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. So if you would just search for our church name, New Life Assembly of God, Woodstock, Alabama, you should be able to find that. And I'm getting ready to launch in the next couple of months my own YouTube channel and to provide some. I'm still working on narrowing some things down. I'm going to do some pastoral type things and talk theology, practical theology about how it applies to everyday life. But I'm looking for somewhere to get that sci-fi nerd angle in there. So, I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to do that. So maybe I'll have a couple of things going, but yeah, I would love to connect with people online. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram. I'd love to talk with you.
Yeah, so we're going to put up a couple of links here so you can find the soon-to-be Dr. Chad Payne and all of the fun folks down there in Woodstock, Alabama at New Life Assembly of God. Thank you so much for being on our Welcome to Hoth show. We sure have enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a blast, Chris. Thank you. And I appreciate all that you do and all that you are, the work you do. You save so many lives and enrich so many lives, and I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Dr.